we're faced with the same reality as every other employer in North America right now. It's going to be labor force. It's going to be labor force. And for us, not only is it labor force, but it's also at the rate we are growing. It's not only maintaining, but adding.
Right.
Ensuring that we have top quality teachers, top quality educational assistants, top quality bus drivers, top quality. So we've torqued and looking at recruitment, and not only the recruitment piece, but the retention piece.
Mm-hmm.
And not only the retention piece, but the support piece. So we've layered on, we've had to do things that traditionally we haven't had to do, is looking at how do we recruit people into our system, looking at our system itself and making sure we're a representative workforce, and how do we recruit from all areas of our community and all areas of the country. At the same time, not only is getting people in the door, is making sure they stay.
Welcome back to the CanadianED Leadership Show, and this is, I believe, episode 22. And we now go to the East Coast. I sort of technically had somebody on that was, Bonnie Stewart from Windsor, previously from PEI. I was sort of counting that as an East Coaster, but it really wasn't somebody living there. So Randy is our first official person working and leading in the Maritimes. And so what a great conversation. And as I don't know if you catch in this one, Randy and I's paths have crossed in some different ways over the years, but we never actually had a conversation. And I was so grateful to have it because we connected on so many different levels, from his deep background in technology and implementing Canada's first one-to-one initiative. That's a new thing. That was a very, very new thing back in the day in Eastern Township in Quebec, and then coming to Saskatchewan. We start the conversation talking a little bit about his time as vice president of the Humboldt Broncos during the bus crash and the impact that that's had on him. So that was a pretty significant, obviously, event in his life, and really all of Canada still thinks about that a lot. And we saw lots of certainly tragedy, but a lot of really amazing things emerge from that. But really just, again, so much good stuff. This maybe could have been 2 episodes, but we just made it into one. And I'm really, really proud of it. Once again, this episode is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnership. Now, could you do something for me? Could you subscribe? Listen, if you listen to this, if you've been a guest on this podcast or are going to be a guest, so just hit like a like button, a rating button, something just that kind of provides a little bit more encouragement and data. We're actually getting a lot of views, but would always love a few more people to subscribe. So do that. This is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships. And, all of this work is done and brought to you by them and the work that we do in and all across Canada and North America. So grateful for that opportunity. So subscribe, like, whatever. Enjoy this episode today with Randy MacLEAN. Hey, Randy, good to be with you. When we talked, and again, our paths have we've talked about how the weird way our paths have sort of intertwined and crossed over the years. You spent some time recently serving in Saskatchewan, and actually you were, the thing that caught my attention was you were president of the Broncos at the time of.
I was the vice president. Vice president. Yeah, I was a vice president.
Yeah, at the time of the crash, and without, I'm sure you've relived it more times than you want, and so I'm not asking you to sort of relive that time, but maybe like the impact of that. Even now, I don't know, what are we at? Like about 5 years.
It was just the 5th year anniversary last April 6th.
Right. So 5 years after, you're no longer in Saskatchewan, but I don't know how you reflect on that time in a sort of without, because again, we could talk about this for probably hours, but just kind of curious about your thoughts about that time in your life.
Actually, Dina, just if you look over my right shoulder up on the wall above me, It has a picture of the Broncos of the 2017, 2018 Humboldt Broncos, our team, as well. Just beside that is a picture that was drawn in the Chronicle Herald the day after the accident, and has all the players, all the provinces as hockey players, and Saskatchewan being helped by the province of Nova Scotia and the province of Ontario. It's so I carry it with me wherever I go. It's a part of my DNA and a part of my fabric now. From the time of the action, I can, as you said, if you give me the mic for 3 days, I can talk about our journey and the team's journey and my journey as part of that. So, as I said, it's become part of my DNA. Last night, funny you asked. Last night I was watching America's Greatest Race, or the Greatest America Canadian
Amazing Race Canada. That's right,
Thank you.
with Ty and Kat.
Tyler Smith and his girlfriend are on it. Tyler was in the accident and he came back to play for us the following year, and then for a little bit. So it's funny. And Caleb Dahlgren, who just graduated from York University, wrote his book and has come out. So I could, it was an honor to be part of. It was a part of my life that is very emotional for me, while at the same time something to be able to support 29 families, a community, a nation, a province, and a nation. And to see the humanity, and really it's a quintessential Canadian story of a group of players being on a bus traveling to a hockey game in northern Saskatchewan, central northern Saskatchewan. It is the quintessential Canadian story, but at the same time, it's something that every parent or every whether it be artist or athlete or Girl Scout or Boy Scout, can identify with getting on a bus with their colleagues and their teammates or their friends and going to an event. It's something that everyone can identify with. And I can tell you exactly where I was standing the moment I found out, at what time I found out, and every event sequentially the moments after that for the next 3 days. It's I've had the pleasure, the honor, the challenge, the tears, the frustration, the opportunity, and the pride, to be able to give away $20 million associated with the GoFundMe page, GoFundMe account, plus the other subsequent donations following that, in support of families, communities, first responders, and actions or events in response to trauma response, and leadership. It's one of the ways I've learned to do business, as we look at resiliency and leadership and resiliency in the face of devastation, in the face of tragedy. And how do we pick ourselves up and take care of people, be tough in issues, but take care of people, and in taking care of people, making at the same time being empathetic and compassionate, and ensuring that, in the sense of assuring that we will move forward, we will succeed, we will support, and we will survive. And it's one of those things that I've like I said, it's part of my DNA. But Dean, I really appreciate the question. It's something I speak very proudly of, and I'm very emotional when I can become very emotional when I speak of the individuals and the events and the time.
Oh man, yeah. No, I mean, I again, I I didn't prep you with that question, so I appreciate you being able to share that. And no question, something like that is going to be a part of who you are forever. And as tragic as it is and was, it is also the human story of these things happen in life, like where no one escapes without tragedy in their life in some way, shape, or form. And what we do with it is always tells a lot about who we are as a community, who we are as a people and individuals as well.
Well, it's true. Today is September. Today is September 13th. 2 days ago was the 22nd anniversary of September 11th.
Right.
So, and I was a vice principal at Massivani High School in Quebec, just 5 hours north of New York City. And I can recall we were standing in the cafeteria at Massivani, rolling TVs in to watch the events of that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is those, and there's not, the line, time heals all. It doesn't. It gives you perspective.
Sure.
It doesn't heal.
No.
It's
not supposed to. It's not supposed to heal. These are wounds and scars that we have to carry with us in some way, shape, or form, right?
Exactly. And they very much create, they don't define who we are, but they help make up who we are and how we see
Absolutely.
how
Yeah,
lens we use in which to see the world.
that's right. Well, and you mentioned Quebec, and another big part, and this is my first, I think, awareness of Randy MacLEAN was your time in Eastern Township in Quebec, launching Canada's first one-to-one computer initiative. And at the time, it was happening. The US was getting a lot more accolades for their one-to-one initiatives. Again, certainly wasn't widespread, but there were just 10 times the size of Canada. There were just more more of that happening. So this was the one in Canada, and really, for a long time was actually kind of the only one that really
Yep.
was getting any recognition. What time has passed now. What leadership lessons do you take with you from that time? What are we saying? 25 years ago, I'm going something like that.
Well,
20 years ago,
2003, we introduced
20 years ago.
the Dennis McCullough Learning Initiative and our one-to-one enhanced learning initiative. Once again, I was a principal at Massive Valley High School at the time. It was my first year principal. We brought in the learning initiative. We gave every student from grade 3 to grade 11, the end of high school, a laptop computer and a MacBook actually. And you learn a lot. One is students do not need professional development. You provide a piece of technology in 1980 when the personal computer was introduced, and then cell phones become introduced, and we put labs in schools, and we put the iPhone is introduced in 04, and you put the piece of technology in the students' hands, and it transforms how they operate, but it doesn't necessarily transform learning. And that's the piece as an educator and a leader we wrapped our mind around. We were the first in Canada, second in North America, to introduce a one-to-one laptop initiative. And my school was 1,100 students. And at the beginning, we tried to transform the learning ecosystem, the learning environment, the school environment, and opportunities and level the playing field for every child, regardless of socioeconomics and their opportunity to learn and their access to the world and what that looks like. And we had recognized the fact that learning is beyond the four walls of a classroom, and technology permeates those walls. And we'd no longer, as teachers, become the garter of knowledge. The world had opened that up. But what we worked over time is how do we transform not only the access to information, but how do we transform learning? And really, it's not about the computer; it's about learning. And the computer provides a vehicle to access to certain knowledge and certain abilities to do certain things. But if we don't see it through a learning lens, and we see it through a technology lens, then it becomes about, I'm going to use the box for lack of a better term, opposed to about what at the end of 60 minutes, 75 minutes, we had 75-minute classroom, then 75 minutes, at the end of a week, at the end of a year, at the end of a month, at the end of the year, what do we want students to learn? So let's focus on learning. And what do we want students to learn? You look at what do we want kids to learn? How do we know if they learned it? What do I do if they don't? What do I do if they already know it? And looking at those questions, and then we map backwards. And then how do we overlay technology on that to really accelerate and provide opportunity for students, not only as they receive knowledge, but also how do they build and create knowledge and build their own, and shift that locus of responsibility from the teacher to the child. That's really what, as it evolved over my 2000 until I left Eastern Township School Board in 2013, over those 10 years, how we shifted our lens. It's not about technology, it's about student learning, and not about technology, but of instruction and evaluation and assessment. And how do you twin putting technology in the hands of kids and put technology in the hands of teachers, where we really transform a symbiotic learning ecosystem and learning environment for both that really is built on creativity and learning and not on technology.
So that all of what you said, certainly resonates. And many would argue 20 years later, we're actually still having those same conversations. We have not necessarily tipped over to say, oh, we used to do it this way and now. And again, I'm not one that wants to paint the picture of education as being this, archaic. We're so far behind. Like, I think that we can get a little carried away with that, because I know you and I both have seen so much in terms of progression and innovation and teachers working hard to put students at the center and learning at the center. However, we still are struggling with this conversation. So now we've got a chat GPT and generative AI in front of us. And I'm hearing some of the people still struggle wrapping their head around what you just said. Why is that? Why are we 20 years into this and we still haven't sort of maybe tipped the scales for the majority of people to understand the role of technology in learning?
And I don't think I'll back it up a little, Dean. I don't think people are I haven't met anyone's anti-technology.
Right.
You know, I have a pen in my hand. When the pen was introduced, or when the chalkboard was introduced, it was going to eliminate the slate. When the slate was introduced, it was going to eliminate and when the computer was introduced, we're going to eliminate the whatever it was at the time, chalkboards or cursive language, the cursive writing. It all comes down to how and support. I've been blessed throughout my career to work in Australia, do consulting work in Australia and through the United States and South America and in Mexico. And I've been in classrooms in Uruguay when they introduced the One Laptop Per Child initiative, where we're talking dirt floors and poverty, but the focus is and with kids with laptops. But once again, I go back. It's still at the end of the day, it's a relationship between adults and kids that makes learning happen. And the computer is an accelerator at different times, but the focus is on learning. And I think we've done a really good job of professional development in some instances. It's been the race to technology, not the race to learning. And sometimes we forget the human element. Because when we first talked earlier, I spoke about you don't have to do professional development with kids. Those children who entered school 20 years ago do not know a world without the internet. But us as adults, teachers, and I'm 52 years of age, I remember going to school and the internet wasn't a thing. I remember schools didn't have computer labs. And we, as adults, students stay the same age, we keep getting older. How do we close that gap in terms of knowledge and skills and abilities? I think it's a journey, but we have to remember that the learning happens in a classroom between teachers and students, adults and students. And the ecosystem around technology, because I was in an art classroom in a school this morning, one of my high schools this morning, and it's an art classroom, and kids are using easels and they're writing things down, but half of them have their phones open beside them, and they're looking at shades, abilities, and tones of how they should transform that into the use of a pen and the use of the drawing piece. I'm in another classroom where a teacher is teaching auto mechanics, and they're talking about an engine and decompression of a cylinder, and the kids have their phones open and they're doing, okay, what does this look like? And she'll look at a YouTube video, or what are the scales, abilities, what's it look like in the manufacturer's guide? It's those pieces. It's not about the technology. It's about the relationship with the child and the teacher and the vehicle of learning. I don't think we've done a really good job of communicating that en masse. You know, in some instances, we've tried to ban the cell phone. It's like going down to the Bay of Fundy or going down to the ocean at low tide and putting your hands up and try to hold the tide back. It's sort of that type of metaphor. Or chat GPT or AI, or any level of AI or laptop computers or a piece of technology. It's about the vehicle and how do we use the learning environment, and those pieces augment the learning environment opposed to seeing them as the learning environment. There's a separation between the two, and I don't think we've done a really good job. The other piece is, formal education, or traditional K-12 education is still, and this is a pejorative statement, is still much built on an industrial model. Students enter based on age and date of creation, and then process through the system, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or grade 11 and pre-K. And if we look at that through a different model based on how the child learns opposed to the age of the child, then I think we can really start shifting. But it's a process. All my educators and all my teachers do amazing work in connecting with kids, and we use technology when it's appropriate. But at different times, we struggle with what could that look like, and we need to spend more time with the adults and with the educators, saying, what could it look like? How do we support those pieces?
Well,
and it's not about the technology; it's about the learning. And where can technology support that?
Right. And I would argue without without us going down a whole other, I don't want to say rabbit hole, but a whole other strand of this, is that a big part of the challenge we face is our understanding of assessment and its role
Oh,
in
that's a
learning.
whole
Right.
other, that's a
We're
whole,
still, and I think that's one that, as much as that there may be some differences in our views of technology, I think the differences in our view of assessment and the role of ranking and grading is probably what skews some of these conversations and takes them in a weird, unnecessary direction. If we could get that one straight, I think a lot of this stuff would just, of course, we're going to use it in this
if
way because
if a child can use a piece of or if we can use a piece of technology and a child will pass in a paper or do an assessment or whatever, and the technology does the work, the issue is not the technology, the piece of or the artificial intelligence. Issue is the assessment tool we're using.
oh, absolutely. I mean,
So
the assumption should be that, of course, kids are using ChatGPT. So now what? Where do we go from here?
when universities introduced, I think it was Pass It In a decade ago or 2 decades ago, when the internet came online and students downloading papers, it was, you're not going to mitigate that. The issue is how, what are we asking students to do,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we evaluate learning and not the action of learning,
Right.
and how do we identify knowledge and the piece of knowledge the child wants to demonstrate. And let's look at this. I agree with you, the assessment model and the instructional model at the same time, but we spend a lot of time on instruction and not a lot of time on the assessment, where we should be using the assessment to drive instruction and what do I need to know, opposed to waiting for the assessment to happen and then realizing the stuff I wish I would have taught 6 weeks ago.
Right. Right. You just, even in your you talked about your time in Saskatchewan. We've talked about your time in Quebec. You just briefly mentioned that you had a little time where you were consulting and traveling
Yeah.
and going to lots of different countries. But now here you are in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about New Brunswick education that might be different from other districts where you've served and worked?
I started my career teaching in Nova Scotia because I born and raised in Nova Scotia. Started my career there teaching in Nova Scotia. Moved to Quebec City, then the Eastern Township. Spent 16 years there, then Saskatchewan, and now I'm at Anglophone East School District based out of Moncton, New Brunswick, as this superintendent CEO. Each system in each province operates their educational system a little different. Quebec and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, for a certain degree, are fairly similar. They're fairly centralized models. Brunswick only has 7 school districts. Saskatchewan had 27. Quebec had 69. So we're 7, three French, four English. So we're for most of us, spent a lot of time working with my 4 counterparts in the English sector, and spent a lot of time working with my French counterparts in the French sector. But there's only 7 of us, and we spent a lot of time working very closely with the Department of Education around ensure we have alignment of what those pieces look like. But it's based on size, and it just looks a little different from province to province. I have 39 schools in my district. Moncton's the fastest growing city in the country. I'm the fastest growing district in the province. We've added 2,400 students in the last 18 months, about an average of, and we're averaging about 60 students a month, between 60 and 100 new students a month we're adding. So and we're very, very cosmopolitan. We're very much representing the Canadian mosaic. Of my 1,000 students I've added in the last 7 months, 10 months, 2/3 of those are new Canadians, new to the country. Last week, I'm on a playground at downtown and talking to 4 parents, 3 of whom have been in the country less than 4 months, and it's their children's first or second day in school. It's really, really exciting. So Eastern Canada, New Brunswick, and our school district is evolving very, very rapidly, which is not something I'd witnessed pre-pandemic in my other lives. So it's very, very exciting as we introduce more new Canadians. At the same time, part of our migration since Confederation, Eastern Canada has seen an outward migration. That tide has shifted. Now we're seeing an inward migration, and we're seeing Canadians move from other parts of the country into Atlantic Canada at numbers we'd never ever witnessed before. So it's really, really exciting. The system itself is a kindergarten through grade 12 system. middle school system, some middle schools. So it's a really, I can say teachers everywhere I've worked with across the country are dedicated to student learning, and New Brunswick teachers are no different. So my leaders are no different. They're dedicated to student learning, making sure that every child, we focus on four things in our school district: literacy, numeracy, safe and caring, ensuring our students and our staff are safe in learning environment, and graduation, ensuring that, when you bring a child to our school in kindergarten, they're going to walk across the stage graduating 13 years later. So it's a really exciting time, Dean. I really appreciate the answer. Or question.
And then, as you think specifically, what do you think then are your sort of challenges and opportunities for, just let's talk about 2023, and what do you sort of see as like, this is going to be a challenge for us, or opportunity?
Well, I asked the exact same question last week by a reporter, and I was doing an interview for CTV. I said, Randy, what do you see as your greatest challenge? I said, we're faced with the same reality as every other employer in North America right now. It's going to be labor force. It's going to be labor force. And for us, not only is it labor force, but it's also at the rate we are growing. It's not only maintaining, but adding.
Right. Right.
Ensuring that we have top quality teachers, top quality um, educational assistants, top quality bus drivers, top quality. So we've torqued and looking at recruitment, and not only the recruitment piece, but the retention piece, and not
Mm-hmm.
only the retention piece, but the support piece. So we've layered on. We've had to do things that traditionally we haven't had to do. Is looking at how do we recruit people into our system, looking at our system itself and making sure we're a representative workforce, and how do we recruit from all areas of our community and all areas of the country. At the same time, not only is getting people in the door, is making sure they stay.
Right.
So how do we layer in support? We've created a program this year for a support program for new principals and new teachers. It's a support growth and support program. Well, I have a principal I've seconded to do that work, and he has three consultants who work with him that are doing that work. At the same time, we're looking at human resources through a different lens. At the same time, we've begun training our own bus drivers. We're onboarding, we are onboarding 14 new bus drivers. The same part, we're supporting educational assistants and onboarding educational assistants and school secretaries and school administrative assistants. So labor force is going to be access and onboarding labor force, but the most equally as powerful and important is ensuring we have an ongoing professional development model that supports people when they come into the system. It's not as simple as giving them people a set of keys and say, go
Right.
forth and teach, or go forth and
Right.
do this, and go forth and drive a bus. How do we ensure not only do we get people in the door, but how do we support them while they're here to ensure ongoing growth, that we get the best people and we support people all throughout their professional journey? That's, it's an amazing, excuse me, is it a challenge? Sure, but it's also an opportunity for a system of our size to be able to reinvent itself in a really cool way.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I was talking to a buddy of mine who works in the agriculture business, and like you said, this is not a education issue. It's just a global issue of recruitment and retention. And one of the key differences he was talking about. I think they were trying to hire an accountant or somebody in finance, and of course, they have, as a private company, the ability to really play with salary, right? Like, we
Yeah.
can offer you and people. One of the drivers, I think, of the changing nature is people's desire to work remotely or work virtually, and so they can do that. Well, those are two things that in education are not very easily attained. You don't have much control over salaries. That's a
No.
provincially determined number. And of course, the core of working in education is human interaction, face to face time.
Yeah.
So I think that presents itself as a challenge, not just for Anglophone East, but you have now the added challenge of an influx of student population. And so it's not just about maintaining what you have, but potentially
Growing.
growing. So I do think it's going to require a very creative thoughtful people to say, how do we create a space where people look at how much they're going to make, which all of us did. We knew how much we were going to make when we started this job and had no aspirations of, oh, maybe one day I'll collect a giant paycheck. That was never going to happen. But how do we uphold the profession as one that is like, you want to be here because this is a great place to work. And I talk to teachers and people across the country looking for them to say, I wouldn't want to do anything else. I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. And unfortunately, that's not what I hear everywhere. But I'm very, very interested when I do hear it from teachers or principals or superintendents or whomever that say, couldn't imagine working anywhere else because I love working here.
Well, and and that's a culture question. That really speaks to a clear, we toughen issues easy on people. There's things that are, it's the big rocks, and how do we support and take, and the clarity around, and Claire is kind, the clarity around what's the business of our business, and then wrapping a culture around that is wrapped in clarity, support, and direction, and excitement and creativity. At the end of the day, our targets are similar to others, I'm sure. We expect every child who walks in our door, kindergarten and pre-kindergarten, to walk across the stage 13 years later. We expect every children to graduate. Our target is 100% of our kids. We want every student to learn and to read and be able to read and write, communicate orally at level from kindergarten through the end of grade 12. We want every child to do math at level. We want every child to feel safe, cared for, and engaged in learning, and every one of our adults to feel safe, cared for, and engaged in learning. So the clarity of our core mission matters. And everything we do wraps around that. And when we wrap around that, we're talking, what does supports look like to support the adults? Because my job is to take care of the kid, take care of people, take care of people, take care of kids. So my job is to create a leadership structure that is focused on those four things around clarity, but is focused on support and direction. So how do we layer in multiple layers of support and not just onboard and not just hire? So when people walk away from our system, it's sometimes I want them to say, I've left, but when I was there, my God, I was supported.
Yeah.
God, I was given opportunity. And I had an opportunity to speak to every one of our teachers on the 29th. I spoke to every one of our teachers on the 29th, 1,500 teachers. And the week before that, 160 members of my leadership team. And we talked about legacy. And the legacy, I asked everyone, when your time is done here, what do you want the students who walked in our doors, and the adults we work with to be able to say about us? And when we had a conversation with my leaders, with the teachers, I said, we'll revisit this, but it's something I want you to think about, that our first day on the job is the building of a legacy. And with that, we really, really can wrap excitement around that, what we want that to look like. And that's what we try to build, really keeping people in the doors around culture. People are taken care of. They're challenged. They're given freedom to create. They're given freedom to fail.
Yeah.
Even if you fall on your face, you move forward. There's times when we're going to fail. No one makes more mistakes in the system than I do. I make the more mistakes than anyone. But if we're going to make mistakes, if we're going to run into things, we're going to run into walls. But it's going to be wrapped around student learning, wrapped around progress, wrapped around improvement, wrapped around literacy, numeracy, taking care of kids, and graduation. And that's how that's how we try to do things. We're building a culture, and I'm supporting the stuff that's already here and creating new stuff as well. But Dean, it's a really important question you asked about, it's not about, I can't compete about salary. It's provincial negotiated. Yeah. It is what it is. The school year is what it is. But there are those really important items that keep people engaged.
That's right.
And those are culture issues, relationship and culture issues. People don't leave jobs because of salary. They leave jobs because of the environment.
That's right.
That's why people leave jobs.
Well, and one of my favorite quotes is like, leadership is culture is not just part of the leadership role. That is the role. Like, that's what it is. Like, how do you do this? And you mentioned, as part of creating this safe environment is people's freedom and ability to fail. And you mentioned, you referenced the fact that you've done this. Can you tell me something maybe more specific about a time where you failed as a leader? And again, that word failure kind of requires its own maybe definition or interpretation. But from however you interpret that, a time you failed and how you responded, and maybe how you think that may have helped a culture, whether it's in here or in a past place you served.
Oh, Dean, I can give you an alphabetized list or just a. How it might fail. Do you want me to pick one? I don't know if I could pick just one, but I will. I make mistakes daily. And one of some of my most glaring errors I've ever made is usually around interactions with adults in really difficult situations. And sometimes parents, and sometimes, direct reports, people who I supervise, and sometimes, members of the community, and sometimes members of the media. But some of them, my most glaring, that I walked, and I can speak to one just the other day. I was having a conversation with one of my directors, and I get pretty emotional because it was something that I just got emotional about, something I wanted, something done a certain way. And my interaction with my director didn't manifest the result that I wanted. And it wasn't anything the director did. It was something that I had done. And the way I responded to a piece of information that they had given me that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to hear. But in that moment, I reacted emotionally, opposed to, okay, systemically, okay, it's not what I want to hear, but how do I communicate this in an appropriate way? And just make sure there's clarity. Obviously, there wasn't clarity of how we want this to lay out. So that's on me, not on them. That's on me as the leader, making sure there's clarity of what we want to look like. But also, when it didn't roll the way I wanted to roll, is how I responded. So, 10 seconds after I spoke, I go, I blew that one. So you go back and you regroup and you say, listen, I made a mistake. This is how I responded. I apologize for the way I responded. What I meant to do was this, and this is not an excuse. It's merely an explanation, and it's not a yeah, but. It's a no. I own that. And how do we? Where do we? What do we need? What did you need? What do you need it to look like for you to be successful? So those are the important thing. It's those, as I talk about the culture, it's those interactions in times of difficulty that will make and break culture issues and relationship. You go back to Stephen Covey's work, emotional bank accounts, we're making deposits because we're going to have to make withdrawals at different times. It's those pieces as I become more reflective as I get older, and more reflective as I am longer I'm in senior leadership positions. It's not how I see myself, it's how others see me. It's not how I intend to respond, it's how I actually respond. It's not what
That's
I say,
right.
it's what people hear. And
It's
I've become more reflective on those pieces. And then when I own it, it gives my staff I work with for them to own it.
yeah.
And it's okay for us to make mistakes. I will make mistakes. I will own it. You make a mistake. I will own it as the leader, because my job is to make everyone else successful. And I own the system. And how do I support? And it's okay for us to make mistakes. What did we learn from it? And ensuring that no matter what it is, we're learning institution for adults as much as we are for students.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's such a powerful example of, I mean, you're building social capital as you do those things, which is critical. You're modeling, which is amazing. But that only happens if you're reflective. And I think that whole idea of how do we be a reflective educator, we talk about this all the time with students. Like, that's what learning is. Like, you learn by reflecting on an experience, not by the experience itself. Like, you have to pull back and say, okay, what happened here? What things am I going to continue to do that were successful? What things should I change because that didn't work very well? So, and yet I think, whether it's in the classroom or in offices or whatever, I don't think as an institution we're great at reflecting, because we rush, because things are at such a hectic pace, right? Like, even in a classroom, the opportunity is just to pause and think about what have we done here. When I see people do it, I'm so excited. And again, I'm saying this out loud to teach my own self to be more reflective. But because I know that the story you just shared is those are the moments that really shine through, and they people remember that time you apologized to me because you acted emotionally, and I remember, like, that whoever that person was, they're not going to forget that. Like, that is such a key thing.
Well, it's, yesterday we had a situation in school that Winlow South student. It's a middle school, and the student, as middle school students do, because I was one of them. We don't always necessarily make choices in the moment, and we act in the moment. And I was talking to the principal at the end of the day, and he said, "Well, I'm thinking of doing this." I said, "You know what? Let's think about this overnight. Let's you and I reconnect in the morning, and maybe time will give us some perspective." So this morning he texts me, he says, "Randy," I said, "Listen, I'm on my way over to the school. Let's have a conversation of what this could look like." So we went through some ideas, and I said, "You know what? Bring your staff together, have a conversation with them about what happened, what the process is, and we're not going to violate anyone's privacy, but everyone know what happened. It happened in school. So what the process is, and then what follow-up's going to look like. But bring them all together so they see you as the leader and as the principal, that you're calm, you're in your space, you know what's going forward, and that you're going to support them to get from here to there. And if they have any questions, you can answer them in the moment, opposed to an email or a letter or whatever it is, and have that conversation." I said, this is they're your staff, and for me to be there takes some authority away from you, but you do it. Let me know how it goes. So we walked through it, and we role played a little bit and what it could say and what it could look like. And I said, "I'm going to another school. Give me a call. Let me know how it goes." So he shoots me off a text about 2 hours later. Says, "Randy, can I give you a call?" I said, "Sure." I said, "Give him a call." He calls me. He said, "How'd it go?" He says, "It was a great conversation. I brought all 30 teachers together. We talked about it. I explained what the process is. Also remind them of some safety protocols. Make sure our doors are locked when you're leaving. These things. If you see this, do this. We'll take care of this. And this is what we're doing." And he said, the air came out of the room. It just, okay, we got this. But you're right, Dean. In the moment, we react. And part of my job and our job in senior leadership is to give people license to breathe. There are very few educational emergencies. We are not emergency room doctors. There's very few. The beauty of our
Right.
jobs is it's 195 days where you got kids for 182. If we blow it today, we get to do it again tomorrow.
Right.
And if something happens, there are emergencies that happen. As we spoke about the Humboldt Broncos tragedy, and there are times where there are tragedies. We talked about 9/11. I'm also rereading a mother's they'll come to me, Sue Kleibolt's book about the Columbine shooting. She's the mother of Dylan Klebold. I'm rereading that book. So there are tragedies that I think decisions have to be made in the moment, but they're 1% of what we do every day. There's what we do every day. If something occurs, okay, let's breathe. Let's regroup and problem solve this collectively. And how do we make it better again tomorrow? Or what can we do an hour from now? Or who do we have to touch base? Or what resources do we have? Ensuring that my school leaders know that they're not in it alone. I have a central office team and a district team, and the district team scales up, and a teacher's not in it alone, an educational assistant's not in it alone, and a bus driver's not in it alone, and a caretaker's not in it alone. There's 3,000 of us as terms of employees. And how do we scale up? Do people understand, what? Okay, what do I do next? I don't have to know all the answers, but what I do have to know is who to call next. And if I don't know, I can always talk to my principal. I can always talk to the superintendent.
I feel like if everybody sort of took that lesson to heart, as you just described, this idea of like, slow down, calm down. We can do this and do this collectively and do this at a slower pace. Just if we manifested that concept, I think back to our recruitment and retention thing, if that was really lived and felt, that would go a long way. That in itself would go a long way. So that's a powerful thing to share. You mentioned just in your last thing, and we're kind of wrapping up now, just so we know here, a book
A
that you
Mother's
read,
a Mother's Reckoning. That's the name of the book.
Mother's Reckoning. Any other book that you're reading or have read recently that you just want to share? It could be for pleasure, could be
I'm rereading. I'm reading also Barack Obama's second book, and don't ask me the name. It's just I'm shift over to Mother's Reckoning again, and I'm rereading. Not rereading, but I'm also just about to read Doctor. Oh, gee whiz! I saw it present over the summer. Psychologist out of Alberta, a child psychologist out of Alberta. Jody Carrington.
Jody
One of her
Carrington.
being seen. I'm about to read that as well. I have about 5 on the go at any one time. Why should someone be led by you is another book. I picked that up last year at You Lead in Alberta. There's another, actually, I've just started. I have 4 other books I'm reading. I've just ordered, actually, Indigenomics, as well as No Surrender, Lands Remains Indigenous, Clearing the Plains, and the other one is Self-Compassionate for Educators. We are educators. There's no more group of perfectionists I've ever met than a group of educators.
There you go. Yeah.
Sometimes we have to acknowledge it. We're trying to do perfect things in an imperfect world, in an imperfect model, and giving ourselves license to breathe.
Yep.
Is one of those things that we work really hard on.
That's awesome. Anything that you've are watching or did watch over the summer? A little guilty pleasure, streaming thing. What can you share?
Suits. I'm a big fan of the series Suits. What else have I watched? Yellowstone.
Yeah.
I'm working my way through Yellowstone. So there's those things I do while I'm doing email and stuff like that. But there are times I decompress. I decompress on a golf course, and it's sitting on a beach. As I'm sitting on a beach, I'm blessed in New Brunswick. Within half an hour, I can be on 4 or 5 beaches, and I sit on the beach and read and watch the waves roll in. So I'm lucky that way.
That's beautiful. And so, a beautiful part of the country. Like you said, we've got all kinds of people moving there. But what are some of maybe the lesser known places or attractions, whatever, however I'm looking for hidden gems. What's the hidden gem in the Moncton area that people should go check out?
Well, in the Moncton area, the city of Moncton has an amazing downtown. There's so many really cool restaurants and terraces and spaces. Also, Moncton's very bilingual. The city of Dieppe is a really cool market Saturday and Sunday mornings, and great food and great environment. The city of Moncton has another market as well, another small market as well. But within Fundy Trail National Park and Fundy Trail Parks are just beautiful spaces. Bucktooth Dunes, about half an hour from here, and you go to Dieppe and Shediac and La Boiteau, when we're half an hour 45 minutes around the island of Prince Edward Island. There's just, you can, from where I'm sitting right now, you can be on a ski slope in 45 minutes. You can be on a beach in half an hour. You can be hiking in 20 minutes, or you can be right next to me, about 500 meters where I'm from. A driver, a 6-iron and a 9-iron. You're in Centennial Park in the city of Moncton, which has amazing bike trails, walking trails, a pool, places for kids, zip line. There's just so many really cool spaces here in the city of Moncton. Grew up in Halifax, and I didn't know we're here. It's just, we have a major junior hockey team here. We were hosted 2 weeks ago. They had YQM, a big country music festival, which my youngest daughter attended. Morgan Wallen and access is that. Guns N' Roses was here 3 weeks ago. So, we're hosting really cool events. So we have a NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament, preseason tournament we're hosting in November. So there's really cool stuff going on in the city of Moncton. Nice. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, I got to get out there. And you referenced the golf a little bit there. That would be something I'm always very curious about as well. Having had a very good golf season, playing a lot of golf. So anyway, hey, Randy, this was fantastic. And you're kind of one of these people, like, I had like 10 more other questions, but like, I don't know if people want to listen for 3 hours, but maybe we'll break it up into some segments and we'll talk another day. But this was fantastic. Thank you much.
No, Dean, thank you. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. As you said earlier, our paths crossed over the last 20 years. It's been a circuitous route. So I really appreciate you reaching out and the opportunity to speak with you today.
This was great. Thanks.